There are some playoff games where, when it's over, all you remember is who won, and then there are games like this one, games where the final score is not the first thing that stays with you. It's the feeling of watching one team come back to life, and the feeling of watching another team look steady for 3 quarters, only to get completely swept away in the fourth. Game 3 between Toronto and Cleveland was exactly that kind of game.
Cleveland came into this one looking like the team with the series by the throat. Up 2-0, more experienced, more settled, more composed, and through the first 2 games, they had already created that exact feeling. If this series stayed on its normal rhythm, Toronto was going to get worn down and eventually break. Meanwhile, the Raptors came into Game 3 with their backs fully against the wall. This was the kind of night where, if they didn't punch back hard enough, if they didn't turn the home crowd into a real weapon, the whole series could start slipping away fast. And what I loved most was that Toronto came out looking like a team that understood exactly that. Right from the first quarter, the Raptors gave this game a completely different smell. This didn't feel like a team trying to hang around anymore. This felt like a team saying, "No, tonight we're really fighting."
The ball was moving faster. Decisions were sharper. The building felt alive. Toronto put up 31 in the first quarter and led 31-25. But the real story wasn't just the 31 points, it was the way they got them. It felt like Cleveland walked onto the floor and immediately got hit in the face with cold water. Tonight was not going to feel like the first 2 games. But this is also where the game started to get really good in that true playoff way, because Cleveland did not crack right away.
And that's what good teams do. They take an early punch and stay on their feet. Toronto came out flying, yes, but Cleveland never let the game fully spin out of their control. They didn't panic. They didn't rush. They didn't let the whole thing turn into chaos. Then in the second quarter, Max Struss helped pull them back. By halftime, it was 54-54. And if you've watched playoff basketball long enough, you know that kind of feeling. The underdog just gave you a really strong first half, but didn't quite bury the favorite. And in the playoffs, if the better team is still breathing, sometimes that's when the trouble starts, because now the question becomes cruel. If Toronto already used that much energy just to get to halftime tied, did they still have another run left in them? And the answer was yes. Actually, not just another run. They had a whole storm left.
The third quarter turned into exactly the kind of tug-of-war longtime NBA viewers love. It was no longer about adrenaline and opening energy. Now it was about composure, about who could carry the emotional weight of each possession. Toronto kept trying to push the pace. Cleveland kept hanging around. The Raptors created little pockets of separation. The Cavs kept answering, and by the end of the third, Toronto was only up 83-81. So if you were just looking at the scoreboard, everything was still wide open. But if you were really watching the game, you could feel it. This whole night was loading itself into the fourth quarter. Whoever carried the fire into those final 12 minutes was going to own the soul of the game. And then the fourth quarter arrived. And Toronto didn't just take the fire, they took the whole gas tank with it.
This is where the game truly broke, not slowly, not in some quiet, methodical way. It broke like a bridge cracking under your feet. Everything still looks fine for a second, and then suddenly it gives way all at once. Toronto scored 43 points in the fourth quarter, and won that period 43-23. Just saying that out loud sounds ridiculous. This is the playoffs, not an all-star game. This is the final quarter of a close game, not garbage time. And yet the Raptors played those last 12 minutes like they had access to a cheat code. At one point from Cleveland's side, it probably felt like the rim was as wide as a garage door for Toronto. Or like the Raptors weren't even shooting with their hands anymore. Like they were controlling the ball with a controller, and hitting green release every trip down. And the best part is that Toronto didn't win, because one player just turned superhuman and dragged everyone else behind him. They won because the whole team caught fire together.
Scotty Barnes was phenomenal, no question. He finished with 33 points and 11 assists. It had the feel of a true star-level playoff performance. But what made it so painful for Cleveland wasn't just the point total. It was how Barnes got them. Cleveland didn't completely fail their defensive idea. In a lot of cases, they did force him into jumpers. The problem was Barnes was making those jumpers like he was shooting in his own driveway. Mid-range cash, pull-up cash, three-ball cash. That's the kind of night that drives a defense crazy. when you're not even doing everything wrong, but the other guy keeps giving you the same answer anyway. And then there was RJ Barrett. Honestly, if Barnes built this stage, Barrett walked into the fourth quarter and grabbed the microphone.
He also finished with 33 points, but in the fourth quarter alone, Barrett had 16 and shot 6 for 6. 6 for 6 in the final quarter of a playoff game that was still hot. That's the kind of stat line that is both impressive and kind of cruel. Because after a while, it stops feeling like you're watching a player score, it starts feeling like you're watching a man go into a video game mode. Every single time Cleveland looked like it might claw back a little bit of hope, Barrett showed up and slapped that hope right in the mouth with another bucket. Nothing flashy for the sake of being flashy, just cold, direct, and painful. And Toronto wasn't done. Because this is what every home team dreams of in a must-win playoff game. Your stars are rolling, and then your role players start acting like they heard the same call too.
Colin Murray Boyles gave them 22. Jamison Battle came off the bench and poured gasoline on the whole thing. That's when you know a team is really in rhythm. When it's no longer just your main guys carrying the emotion, but the entire lineup starts playing like they all agreed before tip-off that tonight the building was going to burn bright. And from Cleveland's side, that's the worst possible signal. Because once the stars are cooking and the supporting cast starts pouring in clean, timely shots too, it stops feeling like a run and starts feeling like an avalanche. Now from Cleveland's perspective, this is an ugly loss in the way good teams hate to lose. They didn't get knocked out right away. They responded, they fought back to tie it. They stayed alive through almost 3 full quarters. But when the game demanded control the most, they broke.
They turned it over way too much. Their offensive rhythm started feeling shaky. Donovan Mitchell only finished with 15. Evan Mobley also had 15. Struss gave them life in the second quarter, but that energy didn't hold. And the deeper this game went, the more Cleveland started to feel like a car driving fine on the highway before suddenly losing its gearbox. Once the fourth quarter got wild, they never found the steering wheel again. And that's why the final score of 126-104 can fool people who didn't actually watch the game. They'll look at that score and think Toronto blew Cleveland out from start to finish. No, that's not what this was. What made this game so good is that Toronto didn't crush Cleveland immediately. They built the game first. They let Cleveland stay close enough to believe it could still drag things back into its own kind of fight. And then, at the exact moment when the game mattered most, they slammed the door.
That's what makes a home playoff win feel so good, not just winning, but letting the opponent taste hope, and then snatching it away when the crowd is at its loudest. For Raptors fans, this is the kind of win that doesn't just save a series. It brings belief back, belief that this matchup is not over, belief that Cleveland is not some untouchable machine, belief that if Barnes keeps playing with this kind of authority, if Barrett keeps attacking like this, and if the building keeps giving them this kind of electricity, then Game 4 is no longer about just trying to survive. It becomes a real chance to drag this series into something dangerous. Toronto didn't just make it 2-1. They changed the whole emotional weather of the series in one night. And for Cleveland, this is a very real warning. Yes, being up 2-1 is still a huge advantage, but there are road losses that are just stumbles. And then there are road losses that make the other team smell blood.
Game 3 felt a lot more like the second kind, because Toronto just showed them that if this series gets dragged into a high-emotion, high-noise, high-chaos environment, and if Cleveland gets loose with the ball and slow to respond, then the Cavs absolutely can be pulled out of their comfort zone. Sometimes a playoff series doesn't shift because of some giant tactical adjustment. Sometimes it shifts because one team suddenly believes again, and the other realizes it can bleed too, and Toronto gave this series exactly that kind of night. So if I had to sum this game up through the eyes of someone who out there and felt every turn of it, I'd say this. This wasn't just a Raptors win. This was the night the Raptors gave the series its pulse back. And the scariest part for Cleveland isn't the 22-point margin at the end.
It's that in the fourth quarter, Toronto played like the entire city had jumped into those 5 jerseys on the floor, and Cleveland couldn't find the valve to stop the flood.